Daniel Harper was known as a man who never missed an opportunity. He had built his fortune from nothing, working long hours, making sharp decisions, and always staying 2 steps ahead of everyone else. People admired him. Some feared him. Many wanted to be him. But very few truly knew him. On this particular morning, Daniel sat in a glass-walled conference room on the top floor of his company's headquarters. The city stretched endlessly behind him, tall buildings and moving traffic reminding him of everything he had conquered. Around the table sat executives, lawyers, and investors. Every face was serious. Every word mattered. This meeting could decide the future of a multi-million-dollar deal. Daniel leaned back slightly in his chair, listening as one of the executives spoke. His phone lay on the table, screen facing up. He rarely allowed calls during meetings, but he kept it close just in case something urgent happened. Then the phone vibrated. He glanced down without changing his expression. The name on the screen made his eyes pause for a brief second. Emily. His daughter. Daniel frowned slightly. Emily was 9 years old. She usually called him in the evenings, sometimes just to tell him about school or to ask when he would be home. It was unusual for her to call at this time of day. The phone kept vibrating. Daniel hesitated. The executive across the table was still talking, explaining charts and numbers. Everyone's attention was focused. Daniel felt all eyes on him, even if they were not looking directly at his phone. He flipped the phone face down. She probably just wants to talk, he thought. I'll call her later. The phone stopped vibrating. For a moment, Daniel felt a small pinch of guilt, but he pushed it aside. He told himself he was doing this for Emily too. All this work, all this pressure, it was supposed to give her a better life. A secure future. That was what mattered, right? The meeting continued. 10 minutes later, the phone vibrated again. Daniel's jaw tightened. This time, the vibration felt stronger, more urgent. He slowly turned the phone over under the table, careful not to draw attention. Emily calling. Again. His heart beat a little faster. She usually doesn't call twice, he thought. He looked up at the room. The lawyer was now speaking, explaining risks and timelines. Everyone was focused. Daniel imagined standing up and saying he needed to take a call. That would show weakness. Distraction. He had worked too hard to be seen as unshakable. He silenced the phone. The vibration stopped, but something did not feel right. Emily was not the kind of child who called repeatedly without a reason. She was quiet, thoughtful, and never wanted to disturb him. He remembered the many times she had waited patiently at the window for him to come home late at night, pretending not to be tired. Daniel swallowed and tried to refocus. As the discussion went on, his mind drifted without permission. He remembered Emily's face the night before. She had asked him if he could come to her school fair that weekend. He had said he would try. She smiled, but her eyes told a different story. She had heard that answer too many times before. Another vibration. This time, Daniel felt it deep in his chest. He looked at the screen. Emily calling. Third time. His breath caught. This was no longer something small. Daniel stood up abruptly, the chair scraping softly against the floor. The room fell silent. Everyone turned toward him, surprised. I need a moment, Daniel said firmly, already walking toward the door. No one questioned him. As soon as he stepped into the hallway, he answered the call. Emily, he said, trying to keep his voice calm. There was silence on the other end. Then a small, shaky breath. Dad, her voice was quiet. Too quiet. Daniel's grip tightened around the phone. What's wrong? He asked. She did not answer right away. He could hear sounds in the background. Cars passing. Voices far away. I didn't do anything wrong, Emily said softly. But I'm scared. Daniel's heart dropped. Where are you? He asked, panic rising despite his effort to stay composed. I was just trying to help, she whispered. I tried to call you before. Her voice broke. At that moment, the world Daniel had built with money, power, and control began to crack. The meeting, the deal, the company, none of it mattered anymore. All he could hear was his daughter's fear, and all he could think about was the 2 calls he had ignored. Emily, listen to me, he said urgently. Stay where you are. I'm coming. As he rushed toward the elevator, Daniel realized something he had never allowed himself to fully accept before. No amount of success could protect him from regret. And no deal was worth the sound of fear in his child's voice. The elevator doors closed, carrying him downward, while his thoughts raced ahead to a truth he was not ready to face yet, but could no longer avoid. Daniel barely noticed the elevator doors opening. He stepped out and walked straight into the parking garage, his phone pressed tightly against his ear. Emily was still on the line, but she was not speaking anymore. All he could hear was her breathing. Small. Uneven. The kind of breathing that came from fear a child did not know how to explain. Emily, talk to me, Daniel said, trying to slow his own voice. I'm here now. I'm trying, Dad, she whispered. They keep asking me questions. Who is they? He asked. She hesitated. That pause felt longer than any silence Daniel had known. In business, silence meant power. Here, it felt like danger. There's a man in a uniform, she finally said. He thinks I did something bad. Daniel froze mid-step. A uniform, he repeated. Are you with the police? Yes, Emily said, her voice trembling. But I didn't steal anything. I swear. Daniel's chest tightened. Emily was not a child who lied. She was careful with her words, often too careful, as if afraid of disappointing people. The idea of her standing alone, being questioned by strangers, made his hands shake. Where exactly are you? He asked again. In front of Mrs. Carter's house, she said. The one with the white fence. I was just trying to sell lemonade like she said I could. Daniel closed his eyes for a brief second. He remembered that house. A quiet street. A safe neighborhood. Or so he thought. I'm coming right now, he said. Do not hang up. No matter what happens, stay on the phone with me. He started the car with shaking hands and pulled out of the garage too fast, tires screeching softly against the concrete. Traffic felt slower than ever. Every red light felt personal, like the world was testing his patience. Dad? Emily said suddenly. Yes, sweetheart, he answered immediately. Why did they grab my arm? She asked. I got scared. That single sentence broke something inside him. They grabbed your arm? He asked, anger rising fast. It didn't hurt, she added quickly, as if trying to protect him from worrying. I just didn't like it. Daniel's knuckles turned white on the steering wheel. I should have been there, he whispered, though Emily could still hear him. He remembered the first call. How he had flipped the phone face down. The second call. How he had silenced it. Each memory hit him harder than the last. You didn't do anything wrong, he said firmly. You hear me? You did nothing wrong. But they keep asking me where my parents are, Emily said. I told them you were working. Daniel felt shame flood through him. Those words, you were working, felt heavier than any accusation. Listen to me, he said. If anyone talks to you, tell them your father is on the way. Do not answer anything else. Just keep me on the line. Okay, she said softly. There was movement on her end. He could hear footsteps, someone speaking in a low voice. Sir, a man's voice suddenly came through the phone. Calm. Official. Yes. Daniel said sharply. This is Officer Miller, the voice said. Your daughter is safe, but we need to clarify a few things. Daniel swallowed his anger and forced himself to speak calmly. She is a child, he said. And she is frightened. I am minutes away. There was a pause. We received a complaint, the officer said. We are just doing our job. Daniel wanted to shout. Instead, he breathed slowly. I understand, he said. But understand this too. I am coming, and until then, please give her space. Another pause. Very well, the officer said. We'll wait. The line went quiet again. Emily spoke after a moment. Dad? I'm here, he said. I was only trying to help, she said. I wanted to save money for my school trip. Daniel felt his throat tighten. That's a good thing, he said. You were being responsible. I'm proud of you. No one had said those words to her yet that day. As he turned onto her street, Daniel saw the familiar houses pass by. Everything looked normal. Peaceful. That somehow made it worse. Pain did not always announce itself with chaos. Sometimes it hid behind quiet streets and clean fences. He spotted a small crowd ahead. A police car parked near the curb. A little lemonade stand pushed slightly to the side, cups knocked over, yellow paper decorations hanging unevenly. And there she was. Emily stood near the sidewalk, her small shoulders tense, eyes scanning every car that passed. When she saw his car, her face changed instantly. Relief flooded her expression, and tears she had been holding back finally fell. Daniel parked without caring where, jumped out of the car, and crossed the distance in long strides. Dad, she cried. He knelt and pulled her into his arms, holding her tightly, shielding her from everything else. In that moment, he understood something that years of success had never taught him. Being present was not optional. It was everything. And the silence between those unanswered calls would stay with him far longer than any business mistake ever could. Daniel held Emily so tightly that she could barely breathe, then quickly loosened his grip, afraid he might be hurting her. He looked down at her face. Her eyes were red. Her hands were cold. One sleeve of her sweater was slightly pulled up, as if someone had held her arm too firmly. You are okay now, he said softly, brushing her hair back. I am here. Emily nodded, but she did not let go of his jacket. Her fingers were curled into the fabric as if she feared he might disappear again. Daniel stood up slowly, keeping one arm around her shoulders. Only then did he look toward the people nearby. A police officer stood a few steps away, his posture stiff but calm. Beside him was a woman from the neighborhood, arms crossed, lips pressed together. A few neighbors watched quietly from their porches, pretending not to stare but failing. Daniel felt a deep anger rise in him, but he held it back. This was not about proving power. This was about understanding what had happened. I am her father, Daniel said, his voice steady but cold. I would like to know why my daughter was treated like a criminal. The officer cleared his throat. Sir, we received a call stating that a child was selling items without permission and possibly taking things that did not belong to her. Daniel looked down at Emily. Is that true? He asked gently. Emily shook her head quickly. No, Dad. Mrs. Carter said I could sell lemonade in front of her house. I used my own lemons. I didn't take anything. Daniel believed her without question. He turned back to the officer. Who made the complaint? The woman stepped forward. I did, she said sharply. I saw her near my fence earlier. Children should not be running businesses unsupervised. It looked suspicious. Daniel stared at her, disbelief written across his face. She is 9, he said slowly. Selling lemonade. Well, I did not know who she belonged to, the woman replied. And children need to learn rules. Daniel felt something shift inside him. Not rage. Something deeper. Something heavier. Rules are important, he said. So is kindness. The officer spoke again, his tone more careful now. Sir, your daughter did not break any law. We were simply checking due to the complaint. Then why was she grabbed? Daniel asked quietly. The officer hesitated. She tried to walk away while we were talking. Emily squeezed Daniel's hand. I was scared, she said softly. I wanted to call you. That was it. Daniel exhaled slowly. The truth settled into his chest like a stone. This was not just about a misunderstanding. This was about a little girl standing alone, without her father, facing fear because the world did not know how to be gentle. The officer looked uncomfortable. I apologize if she felt frightened. Daniel nodded once. Apologies matter, he said. But presence matters more. The officer gave a short nod and stepped back, signaling the end of the situation. The police car door closed. The crowd began to disperse. But Daniel remained standing there, his mind replaying everything he had almost missed. Emily's lemonade stand was a mess. Cups were spilled. Coins were scattered in the grass. A hand-painted sign reading lemonade hung crooked, one corner torn. Emily looked at it sadly. I wanted to save for my school trip, she said. I thought if I didn't ask you for money, you'd be proud. Those words cut deeper than anything else. Daniel knelt beside her again, at eye level this time. Emily, he said, his voice breaking slightly, you never need to earn my pride. You already have it. Her lips trembled. Then why are you always busy? The question was simple. Honest. Impossible to escape. Daniel opened his mouth, then closed it again. For once in his life, he did not have an answer ready. I thought providing was enough, he said slowly. I thought being successful meant being a good father. Emily looked at him with the kind of understanding only children have. I just wanted you to answer. Daniel felt tears sting his eyes. He turned his face slightly, embarrassed, but Emily noticed anyway. Are you sad? She asked. Yes, he admitted. But sometimes being sad helps us change. He stood up and gently took down the lemonade sign. He handed it to her. Let's go home, he said. We'll clean this up together. As they walked to the car, Daniel noticed something he had ignored for years. The quiet. The small moments. The way Emily held his hand a little tighter than before. That night, after Emily had fallen asleep on the couch, Daniel sat alone in the living room. His phone lay on the table in front of him. 3 missed calls. 3 chances to show up sooner. He realized then that the reason those calls had shaken him was not fear of what happened. It was fear of who he had almost remained. A father who arrived too late. And Daniel Harper made a decision in that silence, one that would change not just his schedule, but his entire life. That night, Daniel could not sleep. The house was quiet. Too quiet. The kind of silence that made every thought louder. He lay in bed staring at the ceiling, replaying the day again and again. Every detail came back with painful clarity. The ringing phone. The ignored calls. Emily's shaking voice. The way she had held on to his jacket like it was the only safe thing left in the world. Beside him, the bed was empty. He had chosen to sleep alone, telling himself he needed space to think. But the truth was, he did not feel worthy of rest. He got up slowly and walked down the hallway toward Emily's room. The door was slightly open. Soft light from the hallway spilled inside. She was asleep, curled up with her favorite stuffed rabbit, her face peaceful at last. Daniel leaned against the doorframe and watched her breathe. She trusts me, he thought. Even after everything. That realization hurt more than anger ever could. He remembered how she had said she did not want to ask him for money. How she wanted to make him proud. How she had waited for him to answer the phone. Each memory felt like a quiet accusation, not spoken aloud, but impossible to ignore. Daniel walked back to the living room and sat on the couch. His phone buzzed softly. A message from his assistant reminding him about the meeting he had left early. Another message from a business partner asking if the deal was still on. He did not reply. Instead, he scrolled through his phone gallery. Photos he had barely looked at before filled the screen. Emily on her first day of school. Emily holding a drawing she had made for him. Emily smiling at a birthday party he had arrived late to. He realized something then. He had been present for the pictures, but absent for the moments. Daniel placed the phone face down on the table, just like he had earlier that day. But this time, it felt different. This time, it was a choice. The next morning, Daniel woke up before the alarm. Sunlight filtered through the windows. For once, his first thought was not work. It was Emily. He knocked gently on her door. "Emily," he said softly. "Are you awake?" There was a small pause. Then the sound of movement. "Yes, Dad." When he opened the door, she was sitting on the bed, already dressed, her hair slightly messy. She looked up at him, unsure. Daniel sat beside her. "I owe you an apology," he said. She looked down at her hands. "You already said sorry yesterday." "I know," he replied. "But this one is different." She looked at him again, curious. "I'm sorry for every time I told you later and meant never," he said. "I'm sorry for thinking money could replace time. And I'm sorry I did not answer when you needed me." Emily was quiet. She did not interrupt him. She listened. "I cannot change yesterday," Daniel continued. "But I want to change what comes next." She studied his face, as if trying to decide whether to believe him. "What does that mean?" she asked. "It means," Daniel said, choosing his words carefully, "that today, I am not going to work." Her eyes widened. "Really?" "Really," he said, with a small smile. They ate breakfast together, something they rarely did on weekdays. Daniel noticed how Emily talked more freely when he was not rushing. She told him about school, about a classmate who had helped her clean up the lemonade stand mess, about how scared she felt when strangers started asking her questions. He listened. Truly listened. Later that morning, Daniel drove her to school himself. He parked the car and walked her to the gate, ignoring the curious looks from other parents. Emily held his hand the entire time. Before she went inside, she looked up at him. "Will you pick me up today too?" "Yes," he said without hesitation. "I promise." As she walked away, Daniel felt something strange in his chest. Fear. Not of losing money or deals, but of losing moments like this again. At the office, news spread quickly that Daniel had cancelled meetings for the week. People were shocked. Some assumed something terrible had happened. They were right. Something had happened. That afternoon, Daniel sat alone in his office, not to work, but to think. He wrote a list on a piece of paper. Not business goals. Not profits. Promises. Answer the phone. Be present. Listen first. Protect what matters. When he picked Emily up from school, she ran toward him with a smile he had not seen in a long time. He realized then that change did not need grand speeches or public gestures. It started quietly. That night, as Emily fell asleep on the couch while watching a movie beside him, Daniel understood the real reason those 3 calls had shaken him so deeply. They had reminded him that success means nothing if the people you love feel alone. And for the first time in years, Daniel slept peacefully, not because everything was perfect, but because he was finally awake to what mattered most. Change did not happen all at once. Daniel learned that the hard way. The first week after the incident, he stayed true to his word. He answered Emily's calls every time. Even when he was in meetings. Even when investors frowned. He kept his phone on loud, not silent. Not face down. Loud. People noticed. At first, they whispered. Then they questioned him openly. "You are risking important deals," one partner warned him. Daniel only nodded. "I already risked something far more important," he replied. He did not explain further. He did not need to. At home, Emily noticed the change before anyone else did. She noticed how Daniel sat at the table while she did homework instead of working on his laptop. She noticed how he asked real questions and waited for answers instead of checking his watch. She noticed how he listened without interrupting. One evening, as they ate dinner, Emily suddenly asked, "Dad, are you going to stop being busy again?" The question was quiet, but it carried fear. Daniel put his fork down. "I will still work," he said honestly. "But I will not disappear." Emily studied his face. "Promise?" Daniel nodded. "Promise." That word meant something now. A few days later, Daniel received an invitation to speak at a business conference. The kind he would never refuse before. Same day as Emily's school presentation. He stared at the calendar for a long time. Old Daniel would have chosen the conference without hesitation. New Daniel felt the weight of the decision pressing on his chest. Emily did not remind him. She did not ask. She only placed her presentation paper on the kitchen counter, hoping he would notice. He did. On the day of the presentation, Daniel sat in a small classroom chair that felt too small for him. Parents filled the room. Some glanced at him, recognizing his face from magazines or news articles. He did not care. Emily stood at the front, hands shaking slightly as she began to speak about saving money and helping others. She talked about her lemonade stand. About learning responsibility. About how scary it felt when things went wrong. Then she looked straight at Daniel. "My dad taught me something important," she said. "He taught me that showing up matters more than anything." Daniel felt his throat tighten. His eyes burned. When she finished, she ran to him, and he hugged her tightly. Not rushed. Not distracted. After that day, Daniel made another decision. He started using his influence differently. He funded a program in the neighborhood that taught children about kindness, responsibility, and small business skills. Not with his name printed everywhere. Quietly. Intentionally. He also met with local officers, not to accuse, but to listen. He shared Emily's story, not to shame anyone, but to remind them how small moments feel very big to a child. Some listened. Some did not. But Daniel kept going. One afternoon, weeks later, Emily asked him something unexpected. "Dad, why do you help so many people now?" Daniel smiled gently. "Because I learned that power is not about control," he said. "It is about care." Emily nodded, satisfied. That night, Daniel stood in his office alone. The same office where he had ignored the first call. The same table. The same chair. Everything looked the same. But he was not. He picked up his phone and scrolled to Emily's contact. 3 missed calls from that day were still there in the call log. He had never deleted them. They were not a reminder of failure anymore. They were a reminder of choice. Daniel turned off the office lights and walked out, leaving the city behind him for the evening. When he reached home, Emily was waiting at the window, just like before. This time, he was not late. And as he opened the door and heard her footsteps running toward him, Daniel knew something deep and true. A promise kept is louder than any apology ever spoken. And the man who once measured his worth by success had finally learned how to measure it by presence. A year passed, quietly but completely different from all the years before it. Daniel Harper was still a millionaire. His name still appeared in business articles. His company still grew. But the way he lived inside that success had changed forever. The biggest proof of that change sat beside him every morning at breakfast. Emily. They had built a routine now. Breakfast together. School drop-offs. Evening walks. Small things that once felt impossible were now non-negotiable. Daniel protected those moments like he once protected contracts and investments. One afternoon, while Daniel was in his office reviewing documents, his phone rang. Emily's name lit up the screen. The sound made him freeze for a split second. Not out of fear, but out of memory. He answered immediately. "Yes, sweetheart. I'm okay," Emily said quickly, almost laughing. "I just wanted to tell you I got selected for the school trip." Daniel smiled so wide it surprised even him. "That is amazing. I am proud of you." "I knew you'd answer," she said simply. When the call ended, Daniel leaned back in his chair and closed his eyes. That single sentence carried more meaning than any award he had ever received. "I knew you'd answer." Later that week, Daniel was invited to speak at a parenting and leadership event. He almost declined. But this time, the reason was different. He did not want to speak about success. He wanted to speak about failure. Standing on stage, he did not talk about money or power. He told a story instead. He told them about 3 missed calls. About a frightened little girl standing alone. About how success almost taught him the wrong lesson. The room was silent when he finished. "I learned something," Daniel said quietly. "The phone will ring again. Work will always ask for more. But childhood does not wait. Fear does not wait. Love does not wait." People stood and applauded, but Daniel did not feel proud. He felt relieved. That evening, Daniel picked Emily up early and surprised her with a walk to the park. They sat on a bench watching the sky change colors. "Dad," Emily said suddenly, swinging her legs, "do you remember when you didn't answer my calls?" Daniel nodded slowly. "I do. I was really scared," she said honestly. "I know," he replied. "And I will carry that with me forever." She was quiet for a moment, then smiled. "But I am not scared anymore." Those words healed something deep inside him. That night, Daniel did something he had never done before. He deleted thousands of emails. He reduced meetings. He stepped away from roles that demanded everything but gave nothing back. People said he was slowing down. They were wrong. He was finally living at the right speed. Months later, Daniel framed something and placed it on his office wall. It was not a certificate or an award. It was Emily's old lemonade sign. The paper was worn. The edges torn. But it reminded him of the moment his life changed. Visitors sometimes asked about it. Daniel always answered the same way. "That sign saved me." On Emily's birthday, Daniel turned his phone off completely. No calls. No messages. Just presence. Just laughter. Just time. As he watched her blow out her candles, he realized the truth he wished every parent could learn without pain. Children do not need perfect parents. They need present ones. Late that night, as Emily slept peacefully, Daniel looked at his phone one last time before placing it on the table. No missed calls. And for the first time, that silence felt right. Because the call that once shook him had already done its work. It had not just changed his schedule. It had changed his soul.